morning, Dr. James.
Good morning.
So grab your report, or your declaration, and I will apologize in advance. I will probably refer to this as a report during portions of the day because that's usually what experts do. But I'm talking about the declaration.
I know. It's like a report.
In paragraph 34, you wrote, "If it is true, as plaintiffs suggest, that hacking voting machines is easy because of their vulnerabilities, why has it never been done in an election, and why is there no evidence it has ever been attempted?" Do you see that?
Yes.
And direct me to the portion of your declaration where you describe a statewide forensic investigation to conclude that there has never been a hack of any election in the state of Georgia. Where can I find that in your declaration?
It's not in my declaration.
And you've not conducted any such investigation in Georgia either, right?
A statewide forensic investigation in Georgia?
Yes.
No, I haven't been in Georgia in 20 years.
And direct me to where I can find in your declaration a forensic investigation of the Georgia election system to support your conclusion that there has never been any hack in the state of Georgia for an election. Where can I find that?
I don't say there's never been a hack. I say there's never been a verified incident of a hack.
And we're agreed that there is nothing, no discussion in your declaration of any forensic examination by anyone for the state, the plaintiffs, or anyone else of memory cards or DREs or any other aspect of the Georgia election system. That does not appear in your declaration, does it, sir?
I don't discuss any forensic examination that's been done on Georgia machines.
And you're not aware of any, right?
If by forensic examination you mean taking a machine that's actually been used in an election and examining it after an election, no, I don't know of any such.
In fact, I didn't see any mention in your declaration of having spoken to anyone employed by the state about any of the opinions that you offer in your declaration. Is that right?
The only people I talked to in the state were counsel.
You're not offering an opinion in this case that the current Georgia election system has never been compromised by malware. It's not an affirmative opinion you're offering, right?
That's right. I'm offering the opinion that there's no evidence that it has.
Show me in your report, you've got an entire 7 to 8 page section on the risks of paper ballots. Show me in there where I can find that you are offering the opinion that paper ballots are secure and reliable as a means of voting, and your only issue that you're taking with them, as you just said, is one of timing. Where can I find that?
I don't think it's there. I think paper ballots are a rational means of voting. They have risks. DREs are a rational means of voting. They have risks too.
You then go on in the same paragraph in 36. Anytime a human touches the ballot, it can be modified.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime a machine is used to count a vote, the vote can be modified.
The
right?
count can be modified.
In the first sentence, you indicate DRE systems maintain multiple copies of each ballot. You
Yes.
see that?
Yes.
But when you say multiple copies, you're talking multiple copies of the same data that's generated at the moment that the ballot is cast by the voter, right?
Yeah, that's in the next sentence.
Right. It presumes the choices have been captured accurately in the first place because just multiple copies of that same data that's generated at the moment the ballot's cast, right?
Yes.
And we do know that DREs do not always accurately capture what the voter intended, right?
Well, that is true. A miscalibrated DRE will not capture a vote accurately.
Apart from the voter doing something,
Yes.
filling out the form wrong, putting an unreadable mark, apart from the voter doing something, there's no external factor that's going to cause that ballot, that paper ballot, if we look just at that paper ballot, to indicate anything other than what the voter intended.
Oh, true. Not at that moment until the first time another human touches the ballot.
And you understand Georgia still uses paper absentee ballots today, right?
I think every state does. I'm not saying we shouldn't use them. I'm just saying that one should understand the risks of them.
You're not saying we shouldn't use what? Paper ballots?
Yes.
Let me try this again. Are you testifying as an expert on behalf of the state of Georgia that the hundreds of thousands of voters who rely on paper ballots, whether absentee or provisional or some other means, cannot have reasonable confidence that their votes are counted in each election? Are you offering that as an opinion in this case?
No, I think they can have reasonable confidence. They can't have absolute confidence.
Nor could voters who use DREs have absolute confidence.
I agree. All voting systems have vulnerabilities and risks.
And here's what you describe. A political operative bribes an insider to stop off while transporting ballot boxes to a tabulation center. The operative learns from a poll watcher how many ballots were cast in a particular precinct. The operative then selects that number of pre-prepared ballots marked to favor his party's candidates. When the insider stops off with the ballot box, and here you're talking about meeting with the political operative, is that right? When you say stops off with the ballot box?
Yes.
Okay. And you go on, the seal is removed, the ballots replaced, and the box resealed. Sure enough, the totals at the tabulation center or in a recount will not match those of the precinct ballot scanners. Do you see that?
Yes.
What's an insider?
Somebody who has legitimate access to the ballots.
The scenario you describe here also could happen with memory cards, right? For DREs, where a political operative bribes an insider to swap out a memory card on a machine with an infected malware card, right?
Yeah, far more sophistication is required to do that, but it's conceivable.
Far more sophistication on creating the memory card.
Yes.
No more sophistication required in terms of swapping it out.
No.
And so you believe that the state should mandate a machine to fill the ballot out for them because the machine is better at ensuring their intent is reflected in a ballot than they are. Is that fair?
Well, it's not just better. I mean, the machine is perfect if it's operating right.
If it's operating right.
Yes.
If it has not been compromised, for example.
That's right.
If it has no operational glitches.
But the voter, of course, always has the opportunity to review their ballot.
And you're aware that there are studies that show that voters often don't do that, right?
That's right. They don't. But they have the chance to.
But you agree, you said you're not a fan of the barcodes, you agree that if a BMD is going to be used, the more reliable approach is one that is readable by the human voter, and that what's going to get tallied is what they can actually read themselves. Is that fair?
Yes, I agree.
Oh, on paragraph 52 again, the last sentence reads, a BMD never makes a mark that would not constitute a vote. Do you see that?
Yes, that's right.
And the statement is still true even if the ballot that comes out of the BMD does not accurately reflect the selections that the voter intended. It would still make a mark that would constitute a vote when that thing gets scanned, right?
Yes.
And for the point you're making here, does it matter whether the scanners are centrally located or in precincts?
The point that I'm making here. I think as a general proposition, precinct count is safer than central count in all respects.
You're a fan of in-precinct scanners instead of central scanners.
If we're going to use scanners, it's precinct scanners.
Right, take a look at paragraph 61. Here there's discussion of the attacks by Russia on the voting process in 2016. That's sort of the lead-in context, right?
Yes.
And then in the third sentence you write, instead, attempts were made to intrude into voter registration systems. Had those attacks been successful, all forms of voting, DRE, OpScan, hand-counted paper, or show of hands, would have been affected. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you explain that to me? Why would all forms of voting, as you described, have been affected if the intrusion had been successful into voter registration systems?
Sure. You only get to vote if you're a registered voter. If they interfere with the registration rolls, I show up at the polls and they say to me, you don't get to vote. Doesn't matter what kind of equipment or system is being used at the polls, I don't even get to touch it because I'm not a registered voter.
And provisional in the state of Georgia is by paper, right?
Yes.
And so those voters should have reasonable confidence that their votes under those circumstances on a paper provisional ballot would be counted, right?
Yes, I think they'll have reasonable confidence.
Is an air gap system something more than a system that's not internet facing?
Yes. So I can have a system that, let's just forget about the internet completely. I have different components of a system. I have some in this room and I have some in that room. If it is not possible for one computer to communicate with another computer, except by the physical moving of media from one to the other, they are air-gapped. It doesn't directly relate to the internet. But of course, if I can get to your system through the internet, it's not air-gapped.
So you said except for removable media, so you would consider a system where removable media is sometimes connected to an internet-facing computer and it's also connected to that standalone system. Would you still consider that system air-gapped?
No. The systems in use for election management should never at any point in their life have ever been connected to the internet.
Including by removable media that at some point was connected to an internet-facing computer, for example.
That's right.
And why is that?
Because of the possibility of infection through malware.
What if you had a server that was connected to phone lines, say by a modem? Is that air-gapped?
So air-gap refers to a gap between two things. So if it's connectable by a phone line to something else, it's not air-gapped from that thing. It's copper connected.
And you're aware of incidences involving infiltration in computer systems using phone lines, historically, right?
Yes. I'm not a phone line fan when it comes to voting systems.
Because they can be infiltrated.
Because they can be, and you don't know whether they have been, and you just don't know what's going on.
You've not confirmed for yourself that neither Jim's nor George's DREs are accessible through the internet.
We've been through that. I have not personally confirmed it. It would be very difficult for me to do that because as soon as I left a GEM system, they could plug it into the internet. Even though it wasn't connected when I looked at it, it could be connected 5 minutes later. I don't know.
All right, take a look at paragraph 106.
Huh. Yes.
You wrote here, if the Russians want to skew Georgia's elections, you see where I am at the end?
Yes.
It would be much easier for them to do so by bribing insiders to tamper with paper ballots, particularly absentee ballots, than to mount sophisticated cyber attacks for which there is no realistic penetration vector. Do you see that?
Yes.
But as we talked about before, Russians could also just bribe insiders to tamper with DREs, such as swapping out memory cards, right?
They could.
That would be a realistic penetration vector with the current system, right?
Yes.
You also understand that by infecting only a relatively small number of DREs, that could affect the outcome of an election, right?
It can affect close elections, yes. Of course, you never know in advance which ones are really going to be close.
So you've got a statewide election in which about 4 million voters have voted, and the leading candidate is ahead by, say, almost 20,000 votes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That would mean for the second place candidate to overtake the leading candidate, you'd only have to switch about 10,000 votes between the two of them, right?
Yes.
And so we would be talking about affecting only 1/4% of the overall votes cast, right?
Yes. And the mechanism for doing that, if you infect every machine, you don't have to change much. If you infect a small number of machines, you have to change a lot to get to that percentage.
Do you know how many voters voted in just Fulton County alone in the November 2018 election?
No.
Do you know that it's hundreds of thousands of voters?
Not a surprise.
Do you know the same is true for DeKalb?
As I say, not a surprise. There are a lot of people in the United States.
And in Fulton County and in DeKalb County?
Yes.
So if we're talking about affecting, say, only 10,000 votes in the state of Georgia, you could do that over a small number of DREs in just those two counties, and you'd only be affecting 2 to 3% of the total votes, right?
Yes. If you knew that was going to be the close election.
Or if you thought it might be and you wanted to hedge, just put the malware in, right?
Yeah, right. Remember, all of this stuff leaves evidence if one chooses to look.
Right, as we've established, no one has looked in the state of Georgia for that type of evidence, right? To your knowledge.
Not that I know of. They could.
But a hacker could cause problems with the DRE being alone with it for a matter of minutes, half an hour, maybe less, right?
Yeah, one DRE machine.
But they could manipulate the memory card in a matter of minutes if they had access to it, right?
Yes.
But you've not undertaken any such analysis at any point in your career, have you, sir?
Of a memory card to determine if it had malware? No, I haven't. I rely on Dr. DeMillo.
In fact, you've never even seen vote-stealing malware on a memory card yourself, right?
When you say seen it, no, I haven't seen the code of it. I've seen descriptions of how it works.
You then go on to say, it is therefore important to verify the integrity of a memory card before inserting it into a machine. Right?
Yes.
There's no evidence that Georgia does that for each memory card before it puts it into a voting machine for any election, correct?
I don't know of any. I don't know that they do. I think they should.
You then go on, an authorized copy of the memory card for the election in each precinct can be maintained at the county and a hash value computed. Do you see that?
Yes.
Just so we're clear that we're talking about the same things. There's no evidence that Georgia does that for any of its elections, right?
I don't know that they do. I doubt that they do. They should.
Here you write, an infected computer differs from an uninfected one, and the two can be compared to determine whether to detect any difference. Do you see that?
Yeah, it's not an artfully phrased sentence. It really should be compared to determine whether any difference exists. But that's the sentiment of it.
And there's no evidence that Georgia has done this with any of the computers that are part of its election system, right?
I don't think they've done it.
And then in paragraph 98, you go on to say, in proper parallel testing, officials select a precinct at random and designate a machine to be voted on, but its votes will not be counted in the election. Do you see that?
Yes, I think this was misunderstood because I didn't phrase it correctly. It's not one precinct in the whole state. You'd certainly do this in every county.
So this should be done in every county?
Yes. And in big counties, you would pick more than one precinct.
So a big county like Fulton, for example, how many precincts would you suggest?
I don't know. That's a statistical matter to figure out what the right number would be.
But you would expect someone with statistical expertise to figure out an appropriate statistical number of machines for the parallel testing.
Yes.
And do you understand that Georgia currently does parallel testing on a single DRE out of all 27,000?
I'm given to understand that the process you outlined is the process followed in Georgia. I castigate Georgia for not following my recommendations on how parallel testing should be done.
And you would agree that nothing can be reliably concluded about the reliability of DREs across the state with 27,000 DREs in a statewide election, or even across county or municipal elections, based on parallel testing of a single DRE. We agree on that, right?
The only thing parallel testing of a single DRE will reveal is whether all of the voting machines in the state have been affected, because then the machine being tested would also have been affected.
Right. The only way you could have any confidence that the machine you have indicates anything about the reliability of the 27,000 is if all 27,000 are affected.
I don't have confidence in a procedure which selects one machine out of 27,000.
All right, take a look at paragraph 101 if you would. Here you write, about 4 lines down, it is also possible to open machines for voting. then upload their software for comparison with the authorized software. If the comparison passes, then voters are allowed to use the machine, otherwise the machine is impounded. Do you see that?
Yes.
It's what?
Impounded. There's no evidence that Georgia undertakes what you've described here for its elections, right?
I doubt that they do it.
All right, take a look at paragraph 103. Here you write, you reference a paragraph number, but then on substance you write, Dr. Halderman discusses the futility of detecting after the election malware that has erased itself when the polls close. He is right on this point, which merely means that forensic investigation should be performed before or during the election, e.g. as part of parallel testing. Do you see that?
Yes.
And we're agreed that there's no evidence that Georgia has undertaken what you describe here for their elections, right?
Other than the defective parallel testing.
And APT is...
Advanced persistent threat.
Thank you. And you write here, there's no reason to believe that APT attacks have infiltrated Georgia's vote counting systems, right?
Yes.
You say, in any case, if they had done so, we could determine that by forensic examination because the code on those systems, if it has been altered, would no longer match the hash codes of the authorized software, right?
Yes.
And there's no evidence that Georgia has undertaken at any point the forensic examination for its elections that you describe here, right?
To my knowledge, they haven't.
Here you address two types of intrusions that Dr. DeMillo talked about before. One is polymorphic viruses. The other is backdoor intrusions, right?
Yes.
Penetrations for those could include or could occur if the election system is not air-gapped, right?
Yes. The tabulation system.
Which includes the GEM server, right?
Yes.
You indicate I was an examiner for Pennsylvania in 2006 when the exploit was discovered. When I learned of it, I persuaded the Pennsylvania Secretary of the Commonwealth to threaten Diebold with decertification unless the vulnerability was remediated before the next election. Diebold did so and demonstrated the repair to the satisfaction of the Secretary. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you previously characterized this particular vulnerability as, quote, one of the most severe security flaws ever discovered in a voting system. Do you remember that?
Up to 2006, yes.
Today you have a view that there are more serious flaws that have been discovered with DREs?
I think so.
But there's no evidence that we've seen that Georgia implemented the patch or the remediation that you describe in paragraph 74, or sorry, paragraph 75, for what you characterize as the most severe security flaw ever as of 2006, right?
As I say, I don't know.
You didn't ask anyone that for your opinions, right?
No.
And do I understand correctly that if the current software running in Georgia dates back to 2004, 2005, and they didn't implement any patches after that time, we can infer that the remediation did not occur in Georgia, right?
Yes, we can infer that, and it should be done before the machines are used again.
So, and obviously if malware ends up on the memory cards, it can be propagated between GEMs and the DREs.
Yes.
Do you offer any opinions in your declaration with respect to post-election audits?
I might. I wasn't asked to. That doesn't mean I didn't do it. I think I have some statements in there that I'm not opposed to audits. Audits are a fine thing. Let's do audits.
Dr. Shamos, have you offered an opinion in your declaration regarding Georgia counties and municipalities' preparedness for switching to paper ballots for the November 2019 elections?
No, I don't have information about that.
Do the current DRE machines used in Georgia run on Windows 2000 software?
No. Well, it depends. You're talking about the DRE machines themselves, not the GEM system? DRE machines run on Windows CE.
Let's talk about the GEM software. What does that run on?
I think so, but I don't know.
When you say I think so, you mean Windows 2000?
Yes.
Does Microsoft support that software anymore?
To my knowledge, no.
What security protocols are in place to prevent poll workers from switching memory cards?
At what point? They can't switch the memory card when the machine is energized for an election.
Fair enough.
They could do it
I'll
before, they
rephrase.
could do it after.
Right. My question is what security protocols are in place to prevent that from happening?
Well, I assume it's forbidden. I don't know that they have armed guards watching the poll workers to make sure they don't do it.
Are you aware of any other security protocols?
No.
What vulnerabilities theoretically could be found in an electronic voting system?
Well, I think the experts in this case and the outside security companies that were hired did a pretty good job of cataloging what the vulnerabilities are.
Are you aware of any?
I'm aware of all of those.
And what are they?
There's a mountain of them, okay? Because the system consists of a huge number of pieces. The pieces are geographically distributed. Things have to be moved from one place to another by who knows what mechanism. Computers are involved that can be penetrated. Hardware is involved that can be penetrated. Memory cards can be penetrated. You draw a diagram surrounding every block in the diagram, there's going to be some kind of threat that could be mounted against that block in the diagram.
Right, but you're not disputing that malware can be created, and in fact has been created, that can manipulate election results on a DRE. We're not disputing that, right?
Of course not.
Okay.
DRE is a computer. You can make it do anything doable. You can make it play video games, right? We've seen that in a demonstration. Turn it into a video game.
The only way that we can have confidence in the scenario that the scenario I've set up, okay, you've got a BMD that's generating a ballot, right? It's marking a paper ballot for a voter. The only way you can have confidence that every single one of those ballots that's coming out of the BMD and that's getting scanned and tabulated through a scanner actually reflects the intent of each voter is, one, we have to be certain, reasonably certain, that that BMD is functioning accurately. It's accurately capturing what the voters intended. And two, that the voters themselves have taken the time to read their ballot, review it, recall correctly what all their selections were, and confirm that every selection on the ballot is as intended, right?
I agree with one. I don't agree with two. Here's the reason. I'm a voter. I'm marking a ballot. If I'm very careful when I'm making the choices, and I can rely on the machine to capture them properly, I don't actually have to look at the paper. I can if I want to, if I'm really skeptical, but I don't have to. Now, if a voter is real casual and they're not careful about which candidates they select, it's possible they may have pushed a button or marked a square for somebody they didn't intend to vote for. Then they would have to go and compare that with the paper.
Or if the BMD has been manipulated, such as by malware.
No, but that's number one. Number one is the machine has to be working.
Right. So your point in disputing number two, which is voter verification by reviewing the BMD ballot, you're saying that's not important if we start with the premise that we know the BMD is functioning accurately.
It's not that it's not important. You have to have the ability to do it. You don't have to insist that every voter do it.
As long as we know the BMD is functioning accurately.
And as long as anybody who wants to do it can do it, because they need to have individual confidence in the election.